You ever read a rule and just go, wait, what does that really mean? Well, it turns out that trying to figure out a law is a lot like being a detective. Seriously, it's all about cracking a puzzle, finding those hidden clues, and piecing together the true story behind the words. So get ready, because today we're putting on our detective hats. Okay, let's take a classic example. A sign that just says, no vehicles in the park. Seems pretty straightforward, right? But the second you start to poke at it, this whole puzzle just opens up. I mean, is a bike a vehicle? What about a little kid's remote-controlled truck? And, what happens if an ambulance has to race in to save someone? All of a sudden, that simple little rule, well, it's not so simple anymore. The words themselves are tricky. And this is where the real detective work kicks in. When a law is ambiguous like this, judges and lawyers, they don't just, guess. They have a specific set of tools they use, special aids to interpretation, to figure out what the people who wrote the law truly meant. So the investigation kind of breaks down into two main parts. A legal detective has two main hunting grounds for clues. First up, you got to examine the crime scene itself, which is the actual text of the law. We call these internal aids. And then you start the wider investigation, looking for clues outside the text. Those are the external aids. All right, every good detective knows you start right at the scene of the crime. So let's dive in and start examining the clues you can find right there, inside the law itself. Often, the very first clue is staring you right in the face, the preamble. You can almost think of it like the law's mission statement. It's that introductory bit that lays out the law's purpose, its big goals, and the core principles it's built on. It really sets the whole tone for the rest of the investigation. And if you want to see just how powerful a preamble can be, look no further than this. These opening lines of the Indian Constitution, they aren't just fancy words. They're the very soul of the document. They declare the core values, sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic, that are supposed to guide every other part of it. And believe me, this isn't just theory. It has real-world teeth. In a massive landmark case in India's Supreme Court, this very preamble turned out to be the master key. The court used it to rule that Parliament couldn't just pass any amendment it wanted if it violated the basic structure laid out in these opening lines. Yeah, the preamble, it was the ultimate clue that solved the case. But hey, the preamble's not the only clue you'll find inside the text. Detectives also look at the title of the law. Something like the Consumer Protection Act tells you right away what it's all about. They'll use the interpretation clause, which is pretty much a built-in dictionary just for that law. Super useful. And they even check out the marginal notes, which are like little headlines for each section. Okay, but what happens when the crime scene, the text itself, just isn't enough? You've looked everywhere and the clues just aren't there. Well, that's when a great detective knows it's time to expand the investigation and start looking for outside evidence. And this isn't random, it's a really methodical process. First, you uncover the motive. Then you go and interview the witnesses who were there when it was all happening. And finally, you zoom out to really nail down the ultimate goal. So, step one is all about the why. You got to uncover the motive. Every bill that's proposed comes with this document called the Statement of Objects and Reasons. This thing is the closest you're going to get to finding a clear motive because it explains the exact problem lawmakers were trying to fix in the first place. Okay, next up, you interview the witnesses. And in our case, that means digging deep into the legislative debates. These are the official records of everything that was said in Parliament while the law was being created. What were they worried about? What points did they argue over? All that back and forth? It's absolute gold for an investigator trying to understand what was really going on. And finally, step 3. A good detective has to zoom out and see the big picture. You have to ask, what was the ultimate goal here? Was this law trying to fix public health or protect shoppers or boost the economy? Understanding that bigger purpose helps make sure your interpretation actually lines up with the mission. All right, so every detective worth their salt has a rule book, right? A set of guiding principles they always follow to make sure they're being fair and consistent. Well, in the world of law, these are called presumptions. Think of presumptions as the legal system's default settings. When a law is just too vague, courts fall back on these basic, fundamental assumptions. And they're not random, they're there for a reason, to make sure things are stable, fair, and that our fundamental rights are protected. So what's in this rulebook? Well, a few really big ones. For one, a law is always presumed to be constitutional unless you can prove it's not. Another huge one. Laws are for what's coming, not what's already happened. You can't be punished today for something you did yesterday when it was perfectly legal. And of course, maybe the most famous one of all, the bedrock of so many justice systems, everyone is presumed innocent until proven guilty.
So after all that, why does any of this legal detective work really matter? Who cares? Well, it matters a lot, because this isn't just some dusty academic game. It's about how we actually build a fair and just society for everyone.
See, when judges and lawyers do this detective work right, laws get applied fairly to everybody, not just based on one judge's opinion. It helps us understand what lawmakers were actually trying to do. And all of this together, it upholds the rule of law, it protects our rights, and it gives us a legal system that's predictable, something we can all count on. So the next time you read a rule, doesn't matter if it's in a complicated contract or just a simple sign at the park, I want you to think like a detective. Ask yourself, what's the real purpose here? What are the key words? And what clues might be hiding right there, just beneath the surface?